All right, Shar, you ready to go?
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. Awesome. Welcome to the Identity Special Interest Group for September 19th, 2024. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks to those who are watching the recording. Today we'll go over some working group status updates and then hear a presentation about the Open Wallet Stack from Brian Bellendorf, the CTO of the Open Wallet Foundation. So thank you so much for joining us, Brian. Looking forward to the presentation. Since this is a Linux Foundation call, we're following the antitrust policy and as well the code of conduct listed here. We're recording the call and it will be posted here later today. And let's see, are there any announcements or introductions that anyone would like to make before we jump into our agenda? All right, and if anybody would like to put their name on the attendees list, that would be great. I'll send out the link right there. All right, so unless there are any announcements, I'll go ahead and jump into our working group status updates. I'll try to go through these relatively quickly so we have plenty of time for the presentation, but please do jump in with updates on any working groups that you are attending or involved with. Feel free to stop me as I'm going. So to start off in the indie contributors working group, there's a read replica project going on as a Hyperledger mentorship project. So it's been great to hear updates on that. The next meeting, instead of our regular indie contributors meeting, will instead go to the Hyperledger meetup, which is focused on Hyperledger Indie on Besu, the evolution of the Indie project as an EIDAS 2 EUDI compliant verifiable credential. So looking forward to that. On the Aries working group meetings, they've been continuing their discussions on moving to the OWF. I believe that that Akamai, ASCAR, the agent test harness, DIDCOM mediator service were accepted to move yesterday, I believe, but I think there are others on this call who have more context if any of them want to jump in on that and give
You
any
have it
more
right, Char.
updates. Okay, great.
They were accepted. There's one remaining item that we didn't have time for on the agenda, and that is the inclusion of an interoperability focus call that we are proposing for the replacement of the Aries working group call within there. So that's going to be on the schedule for the next time the TAC meets. And so it's not a no, it just didn't have time to be discussed.
Right. Cool. Thank you for that update. Let's see. And in the Aries Cloud Python user group, again, that has been accepted to move to the Open Wallet Foundation. Also been discussing managing of DIDs and keys, deprecation messages, and then adding DID-TW support into Akamai. Let's see, on non-creds, they've been discussing an Oracle Labs progress report on a high layer of abstraction based on a non-creds V2 and other signature schemes, revocation manager project, Mike Lauder's cryptography focus, and doing a survey as well of other zero knowledge proof based VC efforts. Let's see, on the in the Trust Over IP Foundation, we've met since their last all members meeting, as far as I know, as well as the last communications committee meeting as well. In the governance stack working group, their task force is the governance architecture task force, and they've been discussing revisions for potential TOIP governance meta model spec v2. Let's see, in the technology stack working group, they've got a lot of different task forces. The technology architecture task force is working on the TOIP technical architecture specification, which is a specification of the overall architectural requirements for each of the 4 layers of the TOIP stack and how each layer is abstracted from the one below. And it looks like the second public review draft is ready for that one. Let's see, on the trust registry task force, it sounds like they're working on a spec called the trust registry query protocol. On trust spanning protocol, they have their draft of the TOIP trust spanning protocol v1 specification. And it sounds like there's a new Open Wallet Foundation open source project related to that task force that should be finished later this month. Let's see, in the ACDC task force, they're proposing migration to the new Carry Suite working group. Let's see, the AI and Metaverse task force is working on a content authenticity white paper, talking about how the trust spanning protocol can work with the content authenticity initiative. Let's see, the credential exchanges protocol task force, they took a break in the summer, but now they're meeting bi-weekly as of last week. The DidWebS did method task force is on hiatus, but might be moved to the new proposed Carry Suite working group. Let's see, in the ecosystem foundry working group, they had a presentation on India's digital trust ecosystems from Dr. Pramod Varma. And then in the concepts and terminology working group, they've been working on the TOIP glossary v1, the main TOIP glossary, and the terminology governance guide. Let's see. In the diff, we've got the DIDCOM spec working group. Was there a September first Monday meeting, or did I?
There was not. It landed on a holiday.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. Okay. So we have met since the last spec working group meeting for DIDCOM. In the DIDCOM users group, they're preparing for IAW and preparing for an interopathon as well, with the theme of DIDCOM v2 communication basics. Did you want to give any more details on that, Sam?
Just that if you're interested in being involved, we'd love to coordinate and figure out who is where and what we can facilitate for just the demonstration of the DIDCOM v2 interop. So reach out if you're interested.
Absolutely. Great. And let's see, in terms of the interoperability group and the IoT SIG, I don't believe they've met super recently. Let's see, the community credentials group had a call yesterday. It's a link with more details there. And then let's see, Sean, did you want to jump in with the updates that you added here on the Open Wallet Foundation?
Yeah, I'm going to read this super quick, but I want to give the Aries community a chance to say it. But yes, congrats to the new OWF projects, Occupy, ASCAR, DIDCOM Mediator Service, and a soon-to-be-named agent test harness. I suggested to Stephen Karam we should call it Testy McTestface. He immediately shot that down. So my last two feelings were hurt, but that's okay because I'm staff. That's allowed. There's an OWF meeting calendar on the wiki page. Please take a look. We have lots of great stuff going on around the architecture SIG, the Safe Wallet SIG. We have an AMA for the Safe Wallet Guide on October 1st. I will make sure that that date is shared with the ID SIG community. The credential format comparison SIG next meeting is next Wednesday, 9/25. Is your format there? If not, add it. And then the Wallet and Agents Overview SIG is every other week. It's happening. It just finished up a few minutes ago, and their next meeting is on 10/3. And yeah, we are absolutely thrilled with both the presentation and those projects being accepted. So thank you, Aries community, and we look forward to seeing those projects grow and evolve. Thanks, Shar.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sean. All right. Are there any other working group status updates that anybody would like to share before we jump into the presentation? All right. Thanks everyone for working group status updates. And let's see, I'll pass it over to you, Brian. Feel free
All right.
to screen share.
Let me see. Uh, oh no, I hope my move to a different windowing environment didn't cause share screen to suddenly not work, and it looks like it does. Crap. Sean, would it be too much to ask you to throw up that link that I shared with you
Yep.
and page through it?
Give me 1 second.
God.
Too many windows.
Yeah, I just
Got it.
upgraded Ubuntu, and it switched to that different. What is it? What's the name of that new windowing environment? And I haven't tried sharing screen since then.
No worries. Can you all see my screen and my 900?
Yes.
All right, great.
All right. Is there a chance you can? Oh, okay, that's good enough.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to navigate. Go for it.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I apologize for this. So, great. Well, thank you for all for giving me a moment here to come and talk with you about what we'd like to do at the Open Wallet Foundation with regards to this collection of projects that we pulled together. As some of you know who've followed the initiative, we have now 23 projects. We just added 4 in yesterday's TAC call. Thank you to Sam and obviously to Sean and everyone who's been supportive of that and this kind of vision of trying to bring the different components that make up not just identity wallets, but wallets that could be used for other kinds of purposes together under one roof. So we've assembled this great collection, but with some exceptions, and primarily that's the Aries community. These aren't really components that work together, that talk to each other, and they're still building blocks that require a whole lot of work to get to an actual end user wallet, to varying degrees, right? Some of these are more frameworky than others, but if the goal here is to get to a point where wallets are widely available, where there's lots of options beyond Apple Wallet, Google Pay, where they are general purpose kinds of wallets, and where they can serve lots of different functions, and perhaps users would have more than one wallet on their phone, just like sometimes being able to choose between different web browsers or different mail clients is a meaningful form of agency on the over your data, right? Being able to take your data with you. All of this stuff means we should really strive to make it easy to build wallets and allow for a healthy, competitive wallet ecosystem. That's ultimately what the Open Wallet Foundation is here to do. Our goal is not to actually ship an end user wallet. Our goal is to be just upstream from those and make it easy for lots of other people to do. And that's partly because wallets, to some degree, web browsers are this way too, to some degree mail clients, but wallets in particular have a lot of sensitivity to that last mile, to the terms of service with the end user, to the relationship with secure hardware, and local identity binding. And supporting average users is not something that an open source project is really good at. Supporting consumers we're not any good at that, with rare exception perhaps, but. Generally speaking, what we hope to see is a vibrant ecosystem of lots of companies, small and large, perhaps even other kinds of stakeholders like countries or nonprofit organizations or others, providing wallets to their end users. But we want to make sure in that world these assets are interchangeable. These credentials can move from one wallet to another to avoid lock-in and really emphasize that end user agency and choice, and make it as flexible as you don't need to use a German web browser to visit a German government website or a German language website, right? There should be that openness and transparency out there. So one comparable might be to say the Chromium space, where there's several browsers that compete with each other but are built on this common HTML rendering engine. It could also be comparable to the Linux distro market, the way many of them build on top of Debian, for example, and certainly all of them build on top of the kernel, and even the kernel is slightly different between these distributions. But thinking along these lines, has led us to wanting to propose to our community that we organize our work in a certain way to achieve a certain outcome. And I'll just be humble here, right? I sometimes rebel against the title of chief technology officer because it can infers a lot more control or a lot more agency than I actually have over the projects. My job can't be to tell our projects what to do or not to do. It's obviously partly the role of our TAC to tell our projects, what is the scope of the project? What is this overall of the Open Wallet Foundation? What is the technical scope of the individual projects that are brought in, and what is their direction, and are they making progress, and are they healthy? But as CTO, my hope is, I can kind of paint a picture and nudge and encourage, cajole perhaps at its most, folks down a certain path. And if we get there, then great. And if we don't, it's a missed opportunity. But we all are scratching our own itch, and the job is to figure out how to collectively get somewhere interesting through that individual problem solving. So. With that, I've been talking to folks and proposing the kind of following picture. And frankly, to everyone here, it should not be a surprise, but I find it's useful when, especially talking to non-technical audiences about what we're trying to do. So next slide. So this slide is actually out of date. We have several more projects than this, even not including the ones we just added yesterday. So please look past that. But today, as I mentioned, we've got a collection of projects that some of which bear dependencies between each other, some of which are obviously related to each other. Again, the Aries projects are a great example. But weaving them together is often left as an exercise to the reader. So what we'd like to try to see the community do is organize itself meaningfully into stacks. And as an example of this, next slide, if you were to take a subset of these, and I might even include in here the farm worker wallet OS, which is actually built on top of Credo, right? But to say, here's a combination of components that allow for a certain deployment profile that are written in a certain common language or a small number of languages, and that collectively represent somewhere between 70 and 99% of what you need to actually put a wallet in an app store and deploy it, right? And so next slide. So if we could get these projects to kind of congeal, and that might just be a matter of documentation. It might be a matter of kind of install time, out of the box experience. It might be a matter of some kind of technical implementation. But let's assume it's especially for the Aries projects. I'm going to assume it's going to be pretty simple to say, okay, here's a collection technology that we can call an Open Wallet Foundation stack. And what the criteria is for a stack is something that the Technical Advisory Council should define. What are the kind of minimum requirements? What are the operational demands? What's the responsiveness of the dev team? I mean, this should be kind of our best foot forward when we talk to the world about, what is possible out of this Brownian motion of community activity, right? But let's say these come together as something like the Open Wallet Foundation stack. Next slide. The idea is that stack then is, and again, this should be obvious to folks who've been through deployments like this, but that source code is taken, it's compiled, configured, perhaps even extended in some ways, but it's turned into a branded wallet. And that isn't an Open Wallet Foundation wallet end user app. That is a wallet that's branded either by by a company with a certain set of use cases they want to support, or say somebody who wants to say this is a healthcare kind of design kind of wallet, or this is even an enterprise wallet of some sort. But they compile it, they brand it, and the next slide. They put it in, they certify that it works to whatever requirements they have. Perhaps there's even regulatory requirements. They're the last mile to mapping that. They implement terms of service, that any app store would require. They put a server-side component, if necessary, for custodial services or backups or something like that. And obviously, in the case of something like Occupy, it's predominantly server-side. So just I'm describing this in kind of an end-user client kind of mode, but of course, this can map to cloud wallets as well. And then they deploy it. They put it in an app store, or again, if it's a cloud wallet, they put it up online. Next slide. And that leads to a bunch of happy customers. The idea is this should be repeatable. Next slide. That when the next organization, and it could be another company, it could even be a country, like we're seeing in the in Europe in the EUDI wallet scenarios, where these countries are going to be deploying national wallets, partly for the national PID, which might not be portable. That's an asterisk in a lot of this, but they're hoping for other kinds of credentials that hang off of that core national identity. Well, my hope would be that they could take this same stack, put their national flag on it, adapt it to a local PID, or if there's some local binding requirement they have, or a regulatory requirement or something else. But put that again into an app store, lead to a bunch of happy customers. And the important thing is, next slide, that the assets between, these different instances should be able to be shareable, and obviously not just presentable from one deployment of a wallet. Like if I'm using the German wallet, and Sean is using a wallet that comes from, say, Mozilla, or a wallet comes from Accenture or something like that. Like, we should be able to present to each other, verify each other, have that all work out, and have it be as interoperable as if we were using two different mail clients to email each other, right? Not only that, we should be able to, on the same phone, have more than one wallet and be able to move credentials from one wallet to another without breaking the integrity that allows those credentials to be verifiable. And I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm sure this is what all of you, have been working towards as well, with all the different standards efforts and now the implementation efforts. And I'm super appreciative of all of it. This comes often as a revelation to people outside of our ecosystem, when we say what we want are general purpose wallets, right? What we want are general purpose credentials that are digital assets that sit by themselves and sit in the hands of the end users, and can be verified no matter what their container is. The wallet is really just a container. Now, moving on. That doesn't mean there's only 3 interesting projects at the Open Wallet Foundation. We might see, next slide, a different subset of these emerge. If you, Sean, yeah, right, to form a second stack. And again, this is just conceptual, this is theoretical, don't really pay attention to the labels, but that second stack might form stack 2. The next slide. A different combination might form stack 3. Next slide. And again, we should be able to still provide that same end user guarantee that even when one of the Open Wallet Foundation stacks is branded, deployed, and out there in the field and people are using it, and a second stack is the same thing, that there's some minimum bar of interoperability between people and users of these wallets, and also shareability between these wallets on the same device or in the same collection of devices under the control of the end user. Next slide. So how are we going to get there? We have very much been, like many umbrella projects at the Linux Foundation, an aggregation of different tribes, right? A collection of different projects that have different origin stories, kind of coming together. And what we have, what we do have is a common technical advisory council, as well as a set of special interest groups to try to weave together these efforts across our different projects under the umbrella. And one of the ones that has, we've attempted to put more work into and more time into is an architecture special interest group. And after a couple of different starts, one of the things that we're doing now is we have this prototype architecture white paper, which frankly might be a misnomer. It's a little bit more of a, like a product requirements document. It's really a little bit more of an abstract definition of the functions that we might expect a typical wallet to provide to its end users, and to other software that it talks to. And it's not about a specific architecture. It's not about or set of, say, standards that it adopts, or a specific kind of underlying language or technology framework that it's built on top of. It's really more, here's functionally what it needs to do. That is currently under review by the architecture SIG, but as part of that review, because we think we have something pretty good, and due credit here to a name I'm sure familiar with, all of you are familiar with, Tracy Kurt, who brought a lot of this architecture from the Open Wallet, from an internal effort at Accenture. what we're in the process now of trying to do is map our growth stage projects, which are Bifold and Credo, although that changed yesterday, Bifold and Credo to that framework. And this is really to see what are the shapes of these projects, right? What pieces are there, what pieces are not. Sean just followed up to the location of the paper there, so that we can see where are there gaps. I mean, this as a way to help people visually kind of understand. Thank you, Sean. Visually understand where what these different components do, and where there might be overlaps, where there might be gaps, and then to help inform a process that'll come later with the TAC in terms of trying to define, okay, what's a minimum viable bar for something to be branded, some collection of these components to be branded as an Open Wallet Foundation stack, really with that true north, that end goal of being able to say, here's 99 of the percent of the bits you need, perhaps even 100%, and just slap your logo on it, and then sign an agreement with an app store to put it in, to be able to get to that interoperability, heaven, right? But I think what we need is the systematic approach to help people who are outside of the core teams of those projects understand what they do, what problems they solve, and where that minimum bar is. So Sean, if you can switch back to the presentation. We'll start by kind of focusing on the growth and impact projects and mapping them to this chart. But then once we've identified these pieces, really go out there and promote these projects to a wider audience, and perhaps even highlight, here's the needs to get them the last bit of the way to being a stack, and see if we can even rustle up other companies who are starting to deploy these wallets. As many of you know, with the EUDI out there kind of serving as this forcing function for a whole lot of money being spent on wallet development in Europe, a lot of that with startups, but I was just 2 weeks ago in Berlin participating in this thing the German government is running called the Sprint Funke, which is basically a funded competition where they're funding development of wallet prototypes that meet the EUDI standards to potentially inform the German wallet. And there's a funded track and an unfunded track. The funded track is a lot of money going to companies that are very familiar to us, and some new companies, but all of them startups. But in the unfunded track, you have Google and Samsung and a couple of others participating as well. So there's a lot of really positive momentum here. And with the mandate that every European country provide its citizens with a national wallet, there's going to be a lot of positive pressure, we think, to get these different implementations to converge on a common stack. Interestingly enough, the reference implementation of that the European Commission spent 26 million to develop and put out there under the European Commission's own GitHub organization, that actually consumes one of the components from the Open Wallet Foundation, something currently generically titled identity credentials, which we know we need a new name for. But this is code that originally came from Google and is part of their implementation of verifiable credentials in the Google Wallet. They are even talking about extending that work to turn that into a freestanding identity credential wallet that would sit next to Google Wallet and be, whereas Google Wallet would focus on payments, this identity thing would focus purely on credentials, but there'd be ties between them. But they are committed to open sourcing that and open sourcing that as part of this competition, but also because they believe in the Open Wallet Foundation mission, and they think that would be helpful to getting these 22 member states to converge on as much as possible on a common code base. So I'm hopeful that with that positive pressure from the EUDI and the way that might set a standard, and get, have a real adoption forcing function, the way that the GDPR did when it came to privacy regulations around the world. If you had to conform with GDPR for Europe, you might as well conform to a lot of its requirements or recommendations globally, right? I'm really optimistic we'll see, kind of positive pressure for countries to converge their software development stacks on their software development of their wallets on a couple of common stacks. And so then finally, I'd say a part of this as well, once we do this mapping and we extend that mapping to the projects that are younger into our labs, that by encouraging them to upgrade to growth or impact, that's the product life cycle we have at the Open Wallet Foundation. Part of that will also be, how do you fit what you're doing into these wallet stacks? Because today we're very laissez-faire about architecture. You can bring a project to the Open Wallet Foundation that, as long as it's vaguely wallet related and vaguely competent, we're happy to have you under our umbrella. Down the road, I think what if we do get to the point where there's these, really, solid set of stacks with real traction, we're going to really hope to see inbound projects either be very, very different from what's there before, or look at how they fold their functionality and combine efforts into the growth and impact projects, and into the existing stacks that we have. And this is something that happens organically in some of the umbrella projects out there. Kubernetes and the Cloud Native Compute Foundation did kind of become this freight train that a lot of other stuff kind of either folded into or redesigned itself to work on top of or around. And so this is something that could happen even spontaneously, even if I never existed to state out there, hey, this would be a good idea. But I think if we have this framing in mind as a community at the Open Wallet Foundation, it'll help us move more quickly and take advantage of opportunities that we'd otherwise be more casual about. So with that, that's really my last slide. I guess now would be a good time to open it to questions.
And I'm going to step in for 1 second. I have had conversations with the Credo and Bifold teams specifically about that mapping effort. And I just want to let everybody know it's not a scoring or an evaluation. It's literally meant to be, what are the capabilities and functions and functionality that is available in a given project, so that someone can see, where does this fit with what I want to do? Or maybe there's a way for me to contribute. I can do an X that I don't see on this map. And we're working with those maintainers now to keep that moving. I'm sorry, Brian wanted to turn this over to questions. Does anyone have any questions for Brian? You're up, Sam.
I've got one. Brian, how do you see the relationship of a stack with an interoperability profile? I realize that they're not separate concepts, but also not entirely the same. Can you talk about how you see this concept of stacks working with or differently from interop profiles?
I'd like to not pretend that I know more than I do about the AIPs, and so it could be that this is an elaborate retelling of the vision of AIPs, or an independent re-arrival at the same process. But do you mind if I turn that question back around to you?
I totally mind. No, just kidding. The only thing that I think stack implies is that you have a product that's in one stack or in another stack. And with an interop profile, I think it lends itself a little bit to the point where you can actually comply with several simultaneously. So in your examples, you had like different credential technologies and everything else. But there's not really a reason why a product can't implement more than one of those and exist in more than one of those stacks.
Yeah. My oversimplified drawings didn't really allow for, although I think I might have used an example somewhere in them where there might be a project that shows up in more than one stack. No reason that there couldn't be.
Okay, yeah. So if that's the case, then I think the concept is just quite similar, which I don't care to argue about names. I just wanted to understand if there was a different concept you had in mind.
So you were using AIPs to kind of say, there should be interoperability between wallets that are cloud hosted and using Akapai and wallets that are based on Credo, and interoperability in terms of, somebody should be able to present and verify credentials between them and move credentials between them, that sort of thing.
Yes and no. So first of all, certainly Aries has done interop profiles, but Aries is not the only group to do interop profiles. So I was speaking more generally than that. The idea that, so one of the things that interop profiles do, so I don't know if I've ever seen an official definition, but the common thing seems to be that they can constrain but not expand specifications. So one of the things that happens is that if you have a specification that allows for, say, let me just pick on key types, that allows for 16 different key types, or is completely open-ended, that makes it really hard from an interop perspective, because using different key types means it's often difficult to actually use. So an interop profile may say, hey, we're going to actually pick like one or maybe two or something key types, even though that more are allowed, and we're just going to pursue that. And that way, everyone who adheres to the interop profile can then interoperate with everyone else who adheres to the interop profile, is the goal there. And so, but you can of course do more than one. It doesn't mean you can't do other key types. It just means that you at minimum do the ones in the interop profile, and that allows for more than one interop profile to actually be used. So, I'm not opposed to the word stack. I was just trying to sort out if there was something else there, and it feels like it isn't. It feels like this is the same goal.
I feel like
is to have an organized effort around it.
I feel a little bit like interop profiles is about the collection of specifications that form that minimum bar. That is here's a small constraint set. If you meet this, then you've met the requirements of this profile. Whereas a stack is more about the collection of software. And a stack, if you've really achieved it, it's as simple as clone this repo or download this tarball, make install. Like that. It feels functionally for people on the outermost edge of the circle, so to speak, of developers. Like it should be easy for the country of Montenegro to do the Montenegro wallet on top of an OWF stack with some not extensive amount of software development code or even familiarity with internals, but working. They should work with a vendor, of course, to make sure that it it meets their own needs, and they deploy it internally for their or within the country of Montenegro for their purposes or whatever. But it shouldn't be a huge lift. The country of Germany can afford a big lift. A country like Montenegro can't. That I think is perhaps the difference between an interop profile, which feels specifications driven, and a stack, which is about the collection of software. Does that make sense?
So I like that. And so in that design, then you would have a stack that implements or supports one or more interop profiles. That way, yes, you know what the outcome of the stack is going to be, but then it's really the method of plugging the stack together makes the stack itself unique.
Right. Now, my hope would be, when I hear the word Aries interop profile, I know the Aries project has been about specifications and software kind of collectively. I have to defer to the TAC for what kind of profile or set of profiles they would want to see Open Wallet Foundation stacks achieve. My hope would be that it would be inclusive of the UDI reference architecture, the ARF, wherever that ends up, and that as well as of the anon creds and the other interesting and important stuff that's come out of the Aries project. But I have to leave that up to the TAC because that's their job. And this is where Credo being used by the government of Ireland for their EUDI wallet is super interesting. And having a Animo involved in the German Funke, the Sprint Funke is really interesting. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. I agree with everything. I just didn't have anything more to add.
Okay, great. Any other?
I had a quick question. I was wondering how it was determined which projects are categorized as labs versus growth versus impact.
Yeah, we have a project lifecycle, as you would expect. It's on the so we actually even have a whole website just for our TAC. Let me drop the link in.
I'll get it in there, Brian. You keep talking. I got
Okay.
it.
So there's a life cycle, and it's this was settled before I joined, so I don't quite have the full Marvel superhero origin story behind this, but it was decided to use the terminology labs, growth, and impact. Labs is just like with Hyperledger, things come in under as early as they'd like. Doesn't really have to prove out much beyond, hey, this is something that has the potential to become, a multi-stakeholder project. At growth, you want to see that there's contributors from multiple different organizations and some sign of traction. And then at impact, no, there's really a lot of different deployments out there. There's a good history now of lots of different contributors and of the core maintainers themselves work for different organizations. So there's more detail at the TAC website about those the life cycle and the definitions. And then there's retirement too. I forget what the exact term for archiving, right? At the end, because projects have life cycles.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And it sounds like Akapai and ASCAR, that those will be under the impact level stage.
Yep. Oh,
Yes.
ASCAR came in as impact, Akapai came in as impact, and then Test Harness and DIDCOM Mediator service as growth.
Okay.
And
Cool.
both Bifold and Credo are growth projects right now.
Cool. Thank you. Vipin, did you have a question as well about standards around wallets?
We really have deep appreciation. Oh,
Brian, you cut out there on us.
where was the question? Right. Where was you said there was a question about standards for wallets?
Yeah, it looks like in the chat. Vipin, I don't know if you want to jump in and say more.
Is that all? Oh, Vipin's. Oh, I see. Hi, Vipin.
Hey, I could elaborate on it if you want.
Well, I think one thing we're trying not to be at the Open Wallet Foundation is an inadvertent standards or inadvertent specifications.
I know that spiel.
Yeah. And I think,
but without that,
sure.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, okay, even if you're not leading a standards push, if you could participate in one somewhere, where would that be? And why is that important? Because everything that you talked about just now, interoperability, not just of profiles, but of interoperability between wallets. Like, I want to pay somebody, I have one wallet, the other person has another wallet, and I want to pay that person. So the whole piece around usability as part of a real use case is missing, right? I mean, that's where the interface between a wallet and the other functions like payments or anything becomes important.
Absolutely agreed. And we are certainly tracking, and folks involved in the project are certainly involved in efforts ranging from the VC work at the W3C to MDLs at ISO to the ARF that the EUDI project that the European Union is working on. We want to sit outside that, though, to the same way. Obviously, we have to interface with it, but in the same way that a web browser project, right? Remember in the early days when web browsers also could talk FTP and Gopher and WAIS and even Usenet news protocols. We think it's important that the wallet be general purpose. Right. Well, I think FTP support was removed from from some of them, thank God, because it's such an old archaic protocol. But but the idea of the end user app being general purpose, multi-protocol, flexible in that respect, we didn't really need to have a standards body say this is what all web browsers must do, right? There was this kind of race to the top between, after Mosaic came out and other people started putting out other browsers, and the Netscape came out, like people wanted, there was this pull from the consumer side that in a modular approach and inside of the browser, generally speaking, that allowed for multiple protocols to be supported, multiple, browsers. You had browsers that could natively render both HTML and PDF, right, and XML in a meaningful way, and plain text and other things, right? So like, our hope is that this amalgamation of the Open Wallet Foundation projects into stacks and the meaningful componentization of what goes on there will allow us to kind of surf on top of changes that happen out there in the architecture world when it comes to credential formats, presentation protocols, those kinds of things. And if there's some minimum bar that we maintain that is as minimal as it can be, in order to provide some baseline interop, then I think we're probably on the right approach. And that minimum bar might come up over time, especially as the quality of implementations of certain protocols gets high enough that it's reasonable to require them to be there. But I really want to make sure folks understand we want to push that effort to other places where other people decide is the appropriate home for them. Even like the did standardization work, which is happening across 3 different projects, right? If we can focus on the code that is the running code part of rough consensus and running code for all those other efforts, that'd be great.
Yeah, but it's not natively supporting anything, but having a good plugin standard. For example, going back to the browsers, plugin standards, once you implement that plugin and it conforms to the plugin standard of the browser and it passes certain security and other considerations, then it brings in a whole host of functionality implemented all across.
Yeah.
So is there a similar argument to be made for a wallet? Meaning, can wallets host plugins? Can they be,
Yeah.
can they have different? Yeah.
So yes and no. Yes, I want the companies that are and organizations that are the last mile in delivering the wallet as an app to end users. I want them to easily be able to adopt new protocols, to turn things on and off. I mean, that's just a desire of mine. I can't manifest that in a particular way other than to say, wouldn't it be nice if? But like, hopefully it becomes a platform where we can easily keep up with the evolution of credential formats, presentation protocols, even approaches to biometrics and local binding, right? But and this is just my personal take, I think it might be dangerous to have wallets that are in the field able to take plugins from consumers. Watching how this happens at Mozilla, which I'm pretty close to, and seeing how much effort it takes to keep the Mozilla plugin and add-ons repository clean of spam and to be and clean of security vulnerabilities, both unintentional and intentional. It's a tremendous lift, and that's not something that I think the Open Wallet Foundation wants to take on. We certainly take on security scanning code, and if somebody, and having a security process, and those sorts of things, like, but consumer security is hard. And I don't know, since wallets are going to hold core assets that if transferred away might not be able to be recoverable, right? It's even more sensitive than a web browser in some ways, many ways. So that's my personal take. If somebody were to come up with a consumer wallet that did plugins and wanted to bear the risk themselves, that's great, but I wouldn't see that as something that the Open Wallet Foundation would, because again, we're not hoping to be that last mile to the consumer. Does that make sense?
Wallets are the last mile to the
Somebody has to deliver that last one, for sure. But I'm saying that we're not, our goal is to not be the Firefox of wallets, right? Again, seeing how much effort Mozilla goes to maintain a consumer app, we want to be one step upstream. And I don't think that means there's thousands of wallets out there. I think it does mean most people's phones will have a couple of wallets. And it's important to always be able to have a new wallet that you can move to so that you're not trapped by a vendor if you're using a vendor's wallet of some sort, or trapped by a country. These national wallets, I think, are going to be a useful, bootstrap phase for wallets out there. But at the end of the day, like I said, you shouldn't need a German web browser to access a German government website. You shouldn't need, at my personal take, a German identity credential wallet to participate in use cases that touch German government services. There are people who disagree with that. And I think we are 90% of the way to where I'd like to get if we're getting everybody to use open standards for these things. But I do hope in the long term that there's this bootstrap, that it's a temporary bootstrap of these kind of national wallets to wallets where you can choose between perhaps a wallet that comes from Mozilla, or a wallet that comes from the platform provider, Apple or Google, or one that's specialized in healthcare, or one that's specialized in financial services, or another that specializes in travel. Here's all of my travel credentials and plane tickets and other interesting docs together. Or here's another that's connected to LinkedIn and is my professional accomplishments, wallet. I think that's the kind of world we'll see, is this kind of differentiation, which will actually surprisingly be a consolidation from the 200 apps that you might have that have things that are verifiable credential like. I have an Oakland Zoo app that has my Oakland Zoo membership card on it that I don't really need, if I could just hold that as a credential in another wallet. Anyways.
I will point out the Open Wallet Foundation recently announced and is launching in the next couple of weeks the Open Wallet Forum, which is our effort to engage both governments and standards development organizations, not from the sense of driving standards, but creating neutral ground for those two kinds of organizations to talk. And it's working with the United Nations ITU, International Telecommunications Union, to bring that to life. So it's an evolution of the original Open Wallet Foundation Government Advisory Council. We're evolving that into its own organization around building these bridges between the SDOs and governments.
I just comment on that. I'm actually the chair of the Policy and Governance Working Group in ITU for DCGI, the Digital Currency Global Initiative.
Awesome.
And the wallet is a very important part of this, like we were talking about it being the last mile, then Brian brought up open standards, all of that stuff. I think without that, HTTP, for example, what had a standard. So let's not go back to the browser wars, because I think the whole point is analogies are useful until they are not. We say, okay, let's look at the browsers, how they evolve, but a wallet is a slightly different, a very different and very risky piece that needs a different look. And anyway, any help that I can give, any conversations that we can have with ITU about that, I can put you in touch with some of the guys. I'm sure you guys have your own link into that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that offer, Vipin. We certainly plan to continue to be active here too in the Identity SIG and follow what's going on across as the Hyperledger Foundation evolves to the LF Decentralized Trust project. We know that trust and identity touches everything. You've been so helpful across the 8 years we've been doing Hyperledger, Vipin, in prioritizing the identity use cases and deployments. So you've already been very helpful in helping prioritize this, and we'll certainly turn back here for future help. Brett has a question.
Go ahead, Brett.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever we find ourselves. My name is Brett Carpenter. I'm the managing partner of CRAGCO, a telecommunications startup situated on the campus of Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan. My question is specific to quantum mechanics. Is there any thinking about quantum computing in the wallet, in the software engineering side of it? Has there been any exploration on those factors?
Do you mean such as making sure one is using quantum safe cryptography?
That would be one treatment, but I'm just starting to explore this, and it's something that I want to focus on greatly in my project with the Department of Defense. But it's my thinking that quantum can be useful in this interoperable wallet. I've just started the explore, but is there anybody else that has engaged in this kind of thinking?
Not to my awareness.
Well, we had a presentation. We had a presentation here in the Identity Working Group, which I gave about PQC. And you also know that recently there has been a NIST release of standards for a bunch of PQC.
NIST, right? You're saying
Yes,
NIST?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
cybersecurity.
National
Correct.
Institute of Science, Science and Technology. So
I just want to make sure that I understood the term.
Yeah. So anyone who wants to implement any kind of PQC has to probably follow the NIST standards, because you can't just roll your own PQC.
Correct. Well, my team member with our grant from the Department of Defense is Jim Mason, and so I think he'll bring a lot of knowledge to this forefront. But again, I'm just at the very interim, or just at the very beginning of thinking about quantum. And you're saying that there was a meeting that I missed, and I'm very interested in exploring that in a future context.
Yeah, I mean, there probably is a recording of it somewhere, but on the whole, I think that there's a lot of hype surrounding quantum.
Yeah, there is,
and especially about breaking signatures and so on,
right.
because there are very serious scientific, not engineering, challenges to be
Correct.
overcome, and
Correct.
that is basically based on error correction circuits and the way they have to. I mean, quantum is useful today because you can have optimization like a quantum annealing and all that still implementable, but breaking cryptography that is used in like the RSA or anything else like that is a significant difference. There's a significant difference between that and the successes that they talk about today.
Correct.
And
just to clarify, CRAGCO is an IBM channel partner, and so we are procuring Watson Studio. So I'm looking forward to the future of these meetings and hopefully being able to bring something useful in this context.
Well, maybe we should have a survey of the PQC standards released by the NIST just recently.
That would be useful. That would be very useful.
Yeah. So that, anyway, we'll talk about it at another time,
very
because
good.
I think we are running out of time here.
Yeah. Thank you for everybody's time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Brett, I put in the chat a link to Vipin's the recording and slides to that presentation that was mentioned.
Thank you so much.
For your reference. So yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Yeah, it does look like we are at the end of the time. Thank you so much for your presentation, Brian. Were there any final words you wanted to
No,
end
just
with?
really, we hope to be as open, as transparent, as great a home for these projects as the Hyperledger Foundation has been, and to be as supportive of it. And so please come and join our effort, both the broader efforts as well as the individual projects, if you are interested. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian, for super interesting presentation and discussion. Thanks everyone for jumping in with working group updates, and yeah, appreciate everyone joining. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone.